I never told anyone, not even my own husband, about the life I lived behind closed doors. To the world and to him, I was just a simple housewife. I cooked, I cleaned, I smiled politely at family gatherings. But that was the surface. Beneath it all, I had a secret that could have changed everything. But I kept it hidden because I wanted to know what people would really think if they knew the truth. When I met my husband John, I thought I'd found someone who would see me for me. We married young, full of dreams and hope. Life was simple at first, but as years went by, I noticed subtle hints of judgment in his eyes. He expected me to depend entirely on him, to be the quiet, obedient wife. I didn't mind playing that role, at least on the surface, but deep inside, I had ambitions and independence he couldn't fathom. I had a real job, one I worked hard for, and I had savings, substantial savings. $50,000 neatly tucked away in an account he didn't know existed. $50,000 I earned on my own. And yet every day I pretended I had nothing, letting him believe I was entirely dependent on him. I wanted to see the truth about his love. Would he stay with me if he thought I had no money, no security, nothing at all? The day I overheard him talking to a friend changed everything. I was in the kitchen washing dishes when I heard his voice drifting from the living room. I could never stay with a woman who had nothing, he said, casually, like it was a fact of life. My hands froze in the soapy water. Nothing. That word hit me like a punch to the stomach. Nothing. Did he really see me as nothing? I didn't confront him. No, I had to do it differently. I had to test him. And that's when the plan formed in my mind. I would act poor, really poor. I would downplay everything about myself, hide every sign of comfort, and see if his heart, his real heart, was with me or with the image of a woman with nothing. I started small. I wore the oldest, most worn clothes in my wardrobe. I avoided any small indulgences I'd secretly allowed myself. I ate simple meals, skipped luxuries, even pretended I was careless with money, as if I had no control, no resources, no life of my own. Every glance he threw at me I watched carefully. Every word he spoke, I weighed. And then came the night that changed everything. The night I realized that testing a person's love was far more dangerous than I had imagined. The night I discovered things about him, about myself, and about the fragile truth behind trust. That night shattered me. The next morning I put my plan into motion. I wore a faded sweater, one that had holes John would usually joke about, but now I ignored. I kept my hair tied back messy, not caring how it looked. Breakfast was simple, just toast and black tea, and I pretended I was thrilled with it. Every little thing I did was calculated to seem ordinary, poor, invisible. John noticed, of course. At first he asked questions with mild curiosity. "Why didn't you make eggs?" he said, a trace of irritation in his voice. I shrugged, smiling faintly as if I didn't care. Every interaction became a game of pretending to be someone I wasn't. And the deeper I went, the more I saw the cracks in his patience, the slight judgments, the tiny sighs he tried to hide. I started leaving little hints of poverty around the house. I misplaced bills, pretended I couldn't find small items, even faked clumsiness with money when we shopped. The thrill was strange. I had always been careful, disciplined, and smart with my savings, but now I let it all seem like it didn't exist. All to see the man I loved in a new light, or at least the man I thought I loved. By the third day, I noticed a shift. His eyes, which had often been warm and familiar, now held a subtle edge. He seemed uncomfortable, like he didn't know what to make of me. I kept pushing, watching carefully, gauging his reactions. Would he care? Would he stay? Then came the comment that made my chest tighten. We were at the grocery store standing in the checkout line. I fumbled with a coupon I pretended to have no clue about. John muttered under his breath, loud enough for me to hear. "I can't believe how useless some women are." My stomach churned. Useless. That word stung, but I swallowed it and smiled. He didn't need to know. I had 5 times the money in my account than he earned that month. Every evening, I went through the motions. washing dishes, tidying the house, keeping conversations minimal, and every evening I watched him, trying to see the real man behind the mask he always wore around me. Was he the kind, loving partner I once knew, or had he only ever loved the idea of a woman he thought had nothing to her name? On the fourth night, I decided to take it a step further. I invited his friends over for dinner. I prepared simple food, barely enough to impress them. I acted flustered, anxious, like I had barely enough to handle the evening. John watched me closely, his expression unreadable. I could feel the tension in the room, see it in the slight twitch of his jaw, the way he avoided my eyes. And then, as I had hoped, something cracked. One of his friends asked about my savings in a joking tone, and John blurted out before thinking, "She doesn't have anything." I froze. That was it. The truth, or at least his perception of it, was out. I smiled faintly, quietly, internally laughing at the irony. He had no idea the truth of my $50,000 secret, and that night, as I watched him, I realized how fragile love could be when built on assumptions. The stage was set. The real test was about to begin. That night, after everyone left, the house felt heavier than usual. The air was thick with unspoken words, the kind that gnaw at your soul. John sat across from me, his eyes tired, a hint of frustration in his voice. "I don't know what's going on with you lately," he said, finally breaking the silence. "You've changed. I can't figure you out anymore." I looked at him, my heart pounding in a rhythm I couldn't control. "Changed?" I asked softly, letting a hint of vulnerability slip through my carefully constructed act. "I'm just me," I said, shrugging as if that explained everything. He leaned back in his chair, silent for a long moment. I could see the wheels turning in his head, the judgment, the doubt, the frustration, all aimed at the woman he thought was nothing. It hurt more than I expected. Seeing him so certain that I was less than, even when I had built a life, a secret life, so completely separate from his world, was like watching him unknowingly stab me. I had planned to test his heart, yes, but I hadn't planned on the emptiness that came with seeing it fail. Was this love, or was it just the idea of me he had fallen for? The thought gnawed at my mind, relentless and cruel. I don't get why you're acting like this," he continued, his voice tense. "It's like you're pretending to be someone else. And honestly, I can't handle it anymore." The words hit me harder than I expected. I swallowed, trying to keep my composure. This was it, the moment where my act had to either succeed or crumble. I wanted to reveal the truth, to show him the life, the savings, the independence he had so carelessly underestimated. But I hesitated. Part of me wanted to see him squirm, to see if he would value me for who I truly was. I stayed silent, letting him fill the air with his frustration. Each word he spoke, each judgment he cast, built a story in my mind, a story of what love might be if it was blind, if it was real. And as he vented, I realized something terrifying. If I revealed the secret now, if I showed him my $50,000 savings, it wouldn't just shock him, it would change everything, forever. Would he love me then, or would he resent me for hiding it all these years? By the time he left the room, I felt exhausted. The tension was suffocating, a tightrope stretched between us, and I was walking it blindfolded. I retreated to my bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the ceiling. The secret that had once felt like power now felt like a curse. The plan to test him had turned into a test of myself, a test of my courage, my patience, my heart. And then I heard him whisper, almost to himself, "Maybe I don't know her at all." The words chilled me. He had no idea. He had no idea I was watching, calculating, waiting for him to reveal his true self. He had no idea that nothing he assumed I was, hiding the exact opposite, a life I had built with my own hands, a life he had never seen. That night, I realized love was more fragile than I had imagined. And the real question wasn't whether he would stay, it was whether I could forgive him for judging me so easily, for assuming I was nothing when I was in fact everything. Tomorrow the real test would begin. The next morning, I woke up with a pit in my stomach. I couldn't shake the tension from last night. John's words, maybe I don't know her at all, echoed in my head like a warning bell. My hands trembled slightly as I made my coffee. I had to decide. Today, I would push the test further. I would see the real man he was, and whether love for me existed beyond assumptions. I left small hints of my secret lying around. An old bank statement, a casually mentioned investment, a piece of jewelry I pretended was borrowed from a friend. Each tiny clue was like a trap, waiting to see if he would bite, if he would see through the act. By mid-afternoon, he noticed, his eyes lingered longer than usual on the papers I had forgotten on the table. He picked up the statement, his brow furrowing. "Wait, what is this?" he asked, a note of suspicion in his voice. My heart raced, but I smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides everything. "I don't know," I murmured, shrugging. "I found it the other day. Thought it was nothing." I kept my voice calm, casual, but inside every nerve was on fire. This was the moment. This was the crack in the armor I had been waiting for. He studied me, searching my face like a detective trying to solve a puzzle he didn't want to solve. "Are you hiding something from me?" His voice was low, serious. I could feel the weight of those words pressing down on my chest. My secret, the $50,000 I had earned and saved over the years, was so close to being exposed, and yet I couldn't bring myself to reveal it just yet. Maybe, I whispered, letting the uncertainty hang in the air. I could see his frustration rise, the tension in his jaw tighten. I wanted him to care, to ask, to understand, but instead there was silence, heavy and suffocating. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I watched him, seeing the man I loved, or thought I loved, struggle with the image he had of me. He had judged me, underestimated me, assumed I had nothing. And now, with the truth almost visible, his world was trembling. I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. What would happen if I revealed everything? Would he finally see me, the real me, or would he retreat, shocked and betrayed? The suspense was unbearable, like standing on the edge of a cliff with no safety net. Finally, he sighed, running a hand over his face. I don't know what to think anymore," he admitted, his voice softer now, almost vulnerable. That vulnerability, rare and raw, sent a shiver down my spine. For the first time, I realized the test wasn't just about him, it was about me, about what I needed from love, from honesty, from respect. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding. The secret was still mine, still untold. But tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, he would either see me for who I really was, or the illusion would break forever. The tension was unbearable. The fear of losing him and the fear of losing myself clashed in my chest. And deep down, I knew that nothing would ever feel the same again. The next morning, I woke up with a storm inside me. I couldn't eat, couldn't think clearly. Every second felt heavy, every sound in the house louder than it should be. Today I would see the truth. Today, John would either prove his love or shatter my heart. I carefully dressed in simple clothes. Nothing fancy, nothing that hinted at my secret life. I walked into the kitchen, pretending to fumble with breakfast, just like I had for days. John was sitting at the table, his eyes following me, tense and uncertain. I could feel his thoughts swirling around me like a storm contained in a glass. "I don't understand you," he said abruptly, breaking the silence. "I've tried, really tried, to figure you out, but it's like you're hiding something." I paused, my hand trembling over the teacup. "Maybe I am," I whispered, almost letting the words hang between us. "Maybe I've been hiding more than you know." His eyes widened. He leaned forward, curiosity and fear battling for dominance in his expression. "What do you mean?" he asked, voice low and urgent. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding like a drum. "I'm not what you think I am. I'm not just a housewife. I have my own life, my own work, my own money." My words faltered, but I pressed on, letting the suspense build. "I have $50,000 saved, earned it myself, and you thought I had nothing." For a moment, the room froze. The air was thick, almost suffocating. John stared at me, shock plastered across his face. His jaw tightened, then loosened, as if he couldn't decide whether to be angry, ashamed, or amazed. "You what?" he whispered, barely audible. "I told you nothing because I wanted to see who you really were," I said, my voice quivering with both fear and determination. "I wanted to know if you loved me, or just the idea of me being helpless, dependent, nothing." He sank back in his chair, eyes darting away for a moment. Then he looked at me again, his expression softening, vulnerability shining through. I had no idea," he admitted. "I judged you, and I was wrong. I can't believe all this time I thought—" His voice broke, swallowed by the weight of realization. Tears welled in my eyes. I had wanted honesty, vulnerability, a heart that saw me for me. And now, finally, I was seeing the real him. Not perfect, not unflawed, but human. Scared, remorseful, and maybe capable of love. We sat in silence for a while, the tension slowly dissolving into something fragile but real. I realized then that this secret, this test, had been both dangerous and necessary. Love isn't about assumptions or appearances. It's about truth, trust, and the courage to see someone fully, even when it scares you. That night, as I lay in bed, I whispered to myself, the secret was mine, but the lesson belonged to both of us. And maybe, just maybe, this test had brought us closer than either of us could have imagined. Tomorrow, life would continue, but nothing would ever feel the same again. The next few days were strange. The air between John and me had shifted, yet the tension lingered like a shadow. He was quieter, more thoughtful, and every glance he gave me felt loaded with questions he didn't dare voice. I could see the guilt in his eyes, the realization that he had misjudged me all these years. But I wasn't ready to forgive or fully reveal myself just yet. The test wasn't over. I wanted to see how he would act now, knowing there was more to me than he ever imagined. Would he respect me for who I truly was? Or would he retreat into the assumptions that had almost destroyed us? I started small again. A misplaced bill here. A casual mention of a project I had secretly been working on there. I let him catch tiny glimpses of my independence, testing his reactions, and slowly I noticed changes. He asked more questions, but this time they weren't accusatory. They were curious, tentative, gentle. One evening, as we sat quietly in the living room, I placed a small envelope on the table. It was just a check from one of my freelance projects, nothing extravagant, but enough to hint at the life he hadn't known existed. John picked it up and stared at it, hesitation in his every movement. Where did this come from?" he asked softly. "I told you," I said, my voice steady but calm. "There's more to me than you thought. I didn't tell you because I wanted to see if love could survive assumptions." He sat back, running his hands over his face. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the battle between pride and shame, doubt and realization. I judged you," he admitted, voice low, almost a whisper. "I assumed you had nothing, and now I see I was blind." For the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe a little easier, but the suspense wasn't gone. I needed to see his heart fully, to know that this wasn't just a momentary realization. Love needed proof, actions, not words. Over the next days, he started changing. Small gestures at first, a compliment here, a thoughtful question there, but I noticed something bigger. He started including me in decisions, listening to me, respecting my opinions. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't instant trust, but it was real. Slowly, painfully real. I realized that the $50,000 wasn't just a secret, it was a symbol of independence, strength, and the courage to see the truth. And in revealing it, in testing him, I hadn't just tested his heart, I had tested mine. My patience, my courage, my capacity to love and forgive. That night, I sat alone in the dark, reflecting on everything. Fear, suspense, heartbreak, revelation. It had all led to this fragile moment of understanding. The man I loved had been flawed, yes, but he had the potential to grow. And I, 50 years old, tired but wiser, finally understood that love is never simple, never guaranteed. It's earned day by day, choice by choice. Tomorrow, the real test would continue, but for now there was a flicker of hope, and that flicker, small as it was, felt like the brightest light I had ever known. He looked at me then, truly looked at me, his eyes wide, filled with a mixture of regret, awe, and dawning understanding. I am, he said finally, voice low, sincere. I see you now, the real you, and I am sorry. I judged you. I failed to see your strength. I failed to see everything you are. Tears streamed down my face. After years of pretending, testing, and hiding, this was the moment that everything shifted. The tension, the suspense, the fear, it all led here. A confrontation not just of secrets, but of hearts. And for the first time in years, I felt a fragile, trembling hope. Perhaps love, even after judgment and deception, could survive. Perhaps it could grow stronger than the secrets that once threatened to destroy it. The days that followed were tense, fragile, like walking on ice over deep water. John's demeanor had changed. Yes, but the past judgments, the assumptions, the words that had cut me so deeply lingered like ghosts. I knew that trust isn't restored in a single conversation. It's earned, day by day, action by action. I decided to push him further, not to torment him, but to truly see if he could rise above his past mistakes. I began letting him see more of my life, the work I'd done in secret, the projects I had completed alone, the careful steps I'd taken to save $50,000. Every little revelation was a test, a measure of whether he could see beyond his old assumptions. At first, he was hesitant, awkward. He asked questions, sometimes sharp, sometimes hesitant, but always sincere. And with each question, each attempt to understand, my heart both ached and lifted. This was the man I loved, the flawed, human man, finally facing the truth, finally seeing me. One evening, as I organized some papers on the table, John came up behind me, his hands lightly brushing mine. I froze, surprised by the intimacy of the gesture. I want to understand everything, he whispered, voice low, serious. Tell me your story, from the beginning. Don't leave anything out. I looked at him, searching his eyes for deception, for impatience, for judgment. There was none. Only a raw, desperate sincerity that touched something deep inside me. And so I told him every struggle, every secret job, every late night I'd spent working to build my savings. I told him about the fear, the careful planning, and the countless moments I doubted whether he would ever see me for who I truly was. He listened, not interrupting, not judging, just listening. And when I finished, there was silence, long, heavy, filled with unspoken emotions. Finally, he reached across the table and took my hands in his. I never knew. I see now. You're incredible, he said, voice thick with emotion. I judged you for being nothing, and all this time, you were everything. Tears streamed down my face as a flood of emotions crashed over me. Relief, vindication, sorrow, love, and hope. It wasn't just about the money. It was about respect, honesty, and recognition. I had tested him, yes, but he had passed, not perfectly, not flawlessly, but with sincerity and a willingness to see me. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on the journey. $50,000 had been my secret, but the true wealth was the courage to reveal it, the patience to test love, and the clarity to see who deserved my heart. Love isn't about appearances. It's about truth, trust, and the courage to face reality together, no matter how painful. And as I drifted into sleep, I realized something profound. Sometimes, the greatest tests of love are the ones we impose on ourselves, the tests we cannot control, but the ones that reveal the heart in ways nothing else can. And tonight, for the first time in years, my heart felt seen, understood, and alive. The days after the revelation felt strange but hopeful. The air in our home was different, lighter, yet charged with emotions we hadn't faced before. John's demeanor had changed. He wasn't perfect, and the past couldn't simply vanish, but his actions now reflected the understanding he had gained. For the first time, I felt like he was truly seeing me. We began small, conversations about everyday things, yet infused with honesty and care. He asked about my projects, my savings, my plans, and this time, there was genuine interest, not judgment. It was new, awkward at times, but real. Every small gesture, every attentive question, rebuilt a bridge that had almost collapsed. One afternoon, I suggested we go for a walk, a simple stroll to enjoy the evening. The sky was painted in oranges and purples, a quiet contrast to the storm that had raged inside our home. He walked beside me, hands tucked into his pockets, a little hesitant. I want to make things right, he said softly. I know I hurt you. I judged you unfairly. I looked at him, my chest tightening with a mixture of lingering hurt and growing hope. It's not just about the past, I replied. It's about how we move forward. I need to see that your words and actions match, that you see me, really see me. He nodded, his eyes reflecting sincerity. I will, he promised, voice steady. And for the first time, I believed him, not because of the words, but because I could feel it in the small, careful ways he tried to show it. Over the next few days, we began rebuilding piece by piece. I allowed him to help with things I had once done alone, letting him into the life I had carefully constructed. He respected boundaries, offered support, and slowly, the tension began to melt. It wasn't instant. It wasn't easy, but it was real. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, I realized something important. The secret I had guarded so fiercely, the $50,000, the independence, the hidden life, wasn't just a test. It was a mirror. It reflected not only who he was, but who I was, what I valued and the strength I had built over the years. I reached for his hand, feeling a connection I hadn't felt in a long time. This feels different, I whispered. Not perfect, but honest. And maybe that's enough. He squeezed my hand gently. It's more than enough, he said, voice low, but filled with conviction. I see you now. I know your worth. I won't make the same mistakes again. For the first time in years, I felt a fragile, hopeful peace. The suspense, the fear, the tests, they had all led to this moment. Love had been challenged, questioned, and nearly broken, but it had endured, not because of money, not because of secrets, but because of honesty, courage, and the willingness to confront the truth, no matter how painful. As night fell, I lay in bed, feeling the weight of the past finally lift, replaced by a cautious hope for the future. I knew there would still be challenges ahead, still moments of doubt, but for the first time, I felt seen, understood, and deeply connected. And that, I realized, was more valuable than any secret I could ever hide. Weeks passed and life began to settle into a rhythm that felt fragile, yet promising. John and I were no longer living in the shadow of assumptions, secrets, and judgments. Every glance, every gesture carried the weight of honesty we had fought so hard to achieve. The suspense, the fear, the tension, they were still there in whispers, but now they were reminders, not chains. One evening, as I sat by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I reflected on the journey. $50,000 had once been a secret, a symbol of independence and hidden strength. But now, I realized it had been much more than that. It had been a mirror, showing me not just what John was capable of, but what I was capable of. Courage, patience, and the ability to demand respect and love on my own terms. John entered the room quietly, standing behind me for a moment before sitting down. He didn't need words immediately. His presence alone spoke volumes, a silent acknowledgement of the lessons learned, the mistakes faced, and the bond slowly mending between us. "I've been thinking," he said finally, his voice low but steady. "I can't undo the past, but I want to be better. For us, for you, I want to see you, all of you, and never assume again." I turned to him, searching his eyes for truth, for sincerity, and I found it. Deep, raw, imperfect, but real. "I've always wanted honesty," I replied softly. "Not perfection, just truth." He nodded, taking my hand. "Then I promise you that. No more assumptions, no more judgments, only seeing you and appreciating you for who you truly are." The weight I had carried for so long, the fear of being underestimated, the worry of being loved for the wrong reasons, began to lift. It wasn't gone completely. It never would be. But it was replaced with something stronger. Trust, built slowly, carefully, through moments of fear, tension, and revelation. We sat together in silence for a while, letting the quiet wrap around us. Outside, the world moved on, indifferent to the private storms we had weathered. But inside, something had shifted. We were no longer pretending, no longer hiding, no longer bound by fear. We were simply together. I realized then that the true value of my secret, the money, the independence, the hidden life, wasn't in what it could buy, but in what it had taught me. Courage, strength, clarity, and the knowledge that love, real love, is not built on assumptions or appearances. It is built on truth, respect, and the willingness to see and be seen. As I closed my eyes that night, I whispered a quiet gratitude to myself for enduring, for testing, for surviving, and for finally finding peace in a love that had been tested, nearly broken, but ultimately strengthened by truth. The storm had passed. The suspense, the fear, the heartbreak, they had all led to this fragile, beautiful moment of clarity. And for the first time in years, I felt truly seen, truly loved, truly alive. Even after the revelation, even after the fragile peace we had built, not to deceive, not to manipulate, but to see if John's change was real. Could he truly respect my independence, my strength, my life beyond the house we shared? Or would old assumptions creep back in, like shadows returning after a storm? I began leaving small tasks for him, things I had once done alone, paying a bill, handling a minor work inquiry, even organizing some paperwork for a project. Each time, I watched him carefully, noting how he approached it. Was there patience, respect, curiosity, or frustration, judgment, and the same dismissive attitude I had endured for years? To my relief, he approached each task with care. He asked questions when necessary, sought my guidance, and even expressed interest in learning more about the life I had built. His tone was gentle, thoughtful, and deliberate, a far cry from the impatience and assumptions of the past. One afternoon, as he fumbled slightly with an unfamiliar form, I couldn't resist a teasing smile. "You're learning," I said softly. He looked up at me, a small, shy grin on his face. "I'm trying," he replied, his voice honest. "I don't want to mess this up again." That simple exchange brought a strange warmth to my chest. It wasn't grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was this subtle, quiet shift. The trust we were rebuilding wasn't flashy. It was small, steady, painstaking, and entirely real. But old habits die hard. Occasionally, I caught glimpses of frustration or impatience, tiny cracks in the armor. And in those moments, I reminded myself, this is a process. Change doesn't happen overnight. Love isn't about immediate perfection. It's about effort, awareness, and the courage to confront one's flaws. One evening, as we prepared dinner together, I asked him a question I had never dared before. "Do you understand now what it felt like? To be underestimated, dismissed, judged for having nothing?" He paused, chopping vegetables slowly, eyes focused on the task. Then he met my gaze. "I do," he said finally, voice low and sincere. "I can't undo the past, but I can do better. I will do better. I see now that strength doesn't have to look like what I imagined it to be." Tears welled in my eyes, not of sadness but of relief, recognition, and cautious hope. Finally, he was learning, not just through words but through action, attention, and intention. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on the journey. $50,000, my hidden life. The years of pretending, they had all been tests. But the real test wasn't for him. It was for me. My patience, my courage, my ability to demand respect, and my capacity to see beyond appearances. And slowly, carefully, I realized that love, true love, isn't about hiding or testing. It's about revealing, teaching, forgiving, and growing together. The suspense, the tension, the fear, they weren't just obstacles. They were lessons. Tomorrow we would continue building, step by step, toward a life where honesty and understanding were the foundation. And I, 50 years old, tired yet wiser, finally felt the fragile, glowing warmth of hope that love can survive, even after judgment, secrets, and mistakes. Life had settled into a delicate rhythm, but the air was still thick with unspoken tension. I could feel the change in John, but every small interaction reminded me that trust, once broken, is not easily repaired. I needed to see if his transformation was real or if it would crumble under pressure. That evening, I decided to test a slightly deeper boundary. I asked him to sit with me while I reviewed some financial documents from my secret projects. Normally, this would have been tedious for him, a task he would have ignored or judged. Now, his posture was attentive, his eyes focused. He asked questions, genuine questions, showing curiosity and respect rather than dismissal. I let him see more of my world, the work I had done, the careful planning, the hidden hours that built up my savings. And with every revelation, I watched him carefully, studying his reactions. Was there judgment, impatience, or understanding? To my relief, understanding won. He listened, he asked, he learned, and he treated each detail with care, as if he understood the weight of my effort. The courage it had taken to hide, to endure, to survive. But the real test came when I brought up something personal, something emotional. "Do you know what it felt like?" I asked softly. "To be judged, underestimated, and dismissed for having nothing?" His eyes softened. He leaned back, processing the question. I think I can understand, he said slowly. I know I judged you unfairly and I know I hurt you. I never realized how wrong I was. Tears pricked my eyes, not from sadness but from the weight of the acknowledgement. Finally, he was not just hearing me, he was feeling me, and that mattered more than any word, any gesture. The night stretched on as we continued to talk, sharing thoughts, fears, and past regrets. The storm of secrecy and misunderstanding that had once defined our marriage was slowly dissipating, replaced by something fragile but real. I realized something important. The $50,000, my secret life, my carefully hidden independence, it had all been a mirror, not just for him but for me. It reflected my courage, my patience, and my ability to demand respect. It was proof that I could survive, even when love seemed uncertain, even when judgment threatened to consume me. By the end of the evening, I felt a cautious peace. John had passed another test, not perfectly, not flawlessly, but with sincerity, effort, and a willingness to grow, and that mattered more than I could express. As I lay in bed that night, I whispered to myself, this is what love looks like when it is tested, when it is challenged, when it is forced to confront truth. The fear, the suspense, the emotional tension, it had all led to this fragile understanding. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the warmth of hope that was real, steady, and lasting. Tomorrow, the work of rebuilding would continue. But tonight, I allowed myself to feel it fully, the sense that love, honesty, and courage could coexist, even after judgment, even after secrets. And that knowledge, small yet profound, was worth more than anything I had ever saved. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, our home began to feel lighter. The tension that had gripped every corner was fading, replaced by small, deliberate moments of connection. Yet, I knew the fragile peace we were building could shatter at any misstep. Trust, after all, is not given. It is earned day by day. I found myself observing John more closely than ever. How he spoke to me, how he moved around the house, the small gestures that revealed whether his transformation was real. There were moments of tenderness, like when he brewed my coffee just the way I liked it, or asked me about my projects with genuine interest. And yet, there were tiny hints of the man I had once known, the impatience, the fleeting judgment. One evening, I invited him to sit with me while I reviewed some of my freelance work. Normally, I would have done this alone. Now I wanted to see if he could engage without assumptions. His attention was steady, his questions thoughtful, his reactions careful. He wasn't just observing, he was participating, learning, respecting the life I had built quietly, without boasting. It was in these small moments that the connection between us deepened. Not grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but subtle, almost imperceptible acts that spoke louder than words. The gentle touch on my hand, the patient listening when I explained a detail, the soft acknowledgement of my effort, all of it built a bridge stronger than any argument or revelation could. Yet the suspense lingered. I wondered, had he truly changed, or was this a temporary adjustment? A polite performance in response to the secrets revealed? I decided to test him once more, gently, without deception. I shared a small challenge from my work, a problem I had been struggling with, and waited to see how he would respond. He didn't falter. He offered advice, encouragement, and insight. He didn't dismiss me. He didn't overstep. He simply stood beside me, an equal, a partner, someone willing to engage with my reality rather than judge it. That night, I reflected on the journey we had endured. The fear, the suspense, the heartbreak, the revelation of my secret, all of it had led us here. I realized that the $50,000 had never been the point. It had been a catalyst, a mirror showing both of us who we were, what we valued, and what we were capable of. For the first time in years, I felt the fragile, glowing warmth of hope. Love had been tested, nearly broken, and yet it was growing stronger, more aware, more intentional. And I, 50 years old, weary from years of pretending and testing, finally felt seen, respected, and understood. As I lay in bed that night, I whispered a quiet promise to myself. I would continue to build this connection. Patiently and intentionally, I would nurture the trust that had been restored, and I would never again let fear or assumption dictate the love I gave or the love I deserved. The following week felt like a delicate balancing act. John and I had begun to rebuild our bond, yet the past lingered like shadows at the edges of our home. Every word, every glance carried weight. I was learning to trust again, and he was learning to truly see me. Not the image he had assumed, but the real, strong, independent woman I was. One afternoon, I asked him to join me while I handled some financial planning for a new project. Normally, I would have done this alone, keeping my independence intact. But now I wanted to see how he would engage, whether he could participate without judgment, without undermining, without old assumptions creeping in. He approached the task with care, asking questions and offering insight without stepping over boundaries. His attention was steady, deliberate, and sincere. I could see he was genuinely trying, not just to impress me, but to understand me. "You've built something incredible," he said softly, looking at the spreadsheets and notes spread out before us. "I never realized all the effort, the hours, the planning. I'm amazed." I felt a small, bittersweet smile tug at my lips. "It's been a long journey," I admitted. "And it wasn't easy, but it's mine, and I'm proud of it, even if no one else understood." He reached out, brushing his hand over mine gently. "I see it now," he said quietly. "I understand now, and I want to be part of it, not to control it, but to support it, to be with you in it." The sincerity in his voice, the quiet vulnerability, made my chest tighten. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the secret. It was about recognition, respect, and finally being seen for who I truly was. That evening, we took a long walk together, the sky tinged with orange and pink as the sun began to set. We didn't talk much, but the silence between us was comfortable, not strained. Each step felt like a small victory, each shared glance a reminder that we were moving forward, together. I realized then that the suspense, the fear, and the tension had all been a part of a journey, not just for him but for me. My secret had been a test, yes, but also a revelation. It had shown me my own strength, my own courage, and my capacity to demand respect and love on my terms. As we returned home, I felt a warmth spreading through me. The connection we were rebuilding was fragile, yes, but real. It was based not on assumptions or appearances, but on honesty, effort, and understanding. That night, as I lay in bed, I whispered a quiet affirmation to myself. Love is never simple. It is tested, challenged, and sometimes hidden behind fear or judgment. But when both hearts are willing to see, to grow, and to respect each other fully, love can endure and even flourish despite everything. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace, a fragile, glowing hope that the love we had tested, challenged, and nearly lost could survive and maybe, just maybe, become stronger than ever. The following week felt like a delicate balancing act. John and I had begun to rebuild our bond, yet the past lingered like shadows at the edges of our home. Every word, every glance carried weight. I was learning to trust again, and he was learning to truly see me. Not the image he had assumed, but the real, strong, independent woman I was. One afternoon, I asked him to join me while I handled some financial planning for a new project. Normally, I would have done this alone, keeping my independence intact. But now I wanted to see how he would engage, whether he could participate without judgment, without undermining, without old assumptions creeping in. He approached the task with care, asking questions and offering insight without stepping over boundaries. His attention was steady, deliberate, and sincere. I could see he was genuinely trying, not just to impress me, but to understand me. "You've built something incredible," he said softly, looking at the spreadsheets and notes spread out before us. "I never realized all the effort, the hours, the planning. I'm amazed." I felt a small bittersweet smile tug at my lips. "It's been a long journey," I admitted. "And it wasn't easy, but it's mine and I'm proud of it, even if no one else understood." He reached out, brushing his hand over mine gently. "I see it now," he said quietly. "I understand now, and I want to be part of it, not to control it, but to support it, to be with you in it." The sincerity in his voice, the quiet vulnerability, made my chest tighten. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the secret. It was about recognition, respect, and finally being seen for who I truly was. That evening, we took a long walk together, the sky tinged with orange and pink as the sun began to set. We didn't talk much, but the silence between us was comfortable, not strained. Each step felt like a small victory, each shared glance a reminder that we were moving forward, together. I realized then that the suspense, the fear, and the tension had all been a part of a journey, not just for him but for me. My secret had been a test, yes, but also a revelation. It had shown me my own strength, my own courage, and my capacity to demand respect and love on my terms. As we returned home, I felt a warmth spreading through me. The connection we were rebuilding was fragile, yes, but real. It was based not on assumptions or appearances, but on honesty, effort, and understanding. That night, as I lay in bed, I whispered a quiet affirmation to myself. Love is never simple. It is tested, challenged, and sometimes hidden behind fear or judgment. But when both hearts are willing to see, to grow, and to respect each other fully, love can endure and even flourish despite everything. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace, a fragile, glowing hope that the love we had tested, challenged, and nearly lost could survive and maybe, just maybe, become stronger than ever. Even after weeks of cautious rebuilding, a part of me couldn't shake the lingering doubt. Could John's change last? Could he truly respect and value me for who I was? Or would old habits and assumptions eventually creep back in? I needed to see the depth of his growth, not just in words but in actions. That evening, I decided on a subtle test. I asked him to join me at a meeting with a potential client, a small, professional interaction, but one that required patience, observation, and respect. Normally, I would have handled it alone, keeping control of my independence intact. But tonight, I wanted to see him step into my world without judgment. He agreed immediately, his voice calm but serious. "I'll be there," he said. "I want to understand more." At the meeting, I observed him closely. He asked questions with curiosity, never interrupting, never dismissing my input. When I explained details of the project, he listened intently, nodding, occasionally offering a thoughtful suggestion. His engagement was genuine, deliberate, and entirely respectful. After the client left, he turned to me, eyes wide with sincerity. I never realized the level of detail, the pressure, the decisions you handle," he admitted. "I thought I knew you, but I see now how much strength and intelligence you bring to everything you do." My chest tightened with emotion. It wasn't just his words, it was the recognition, the validation, the clear evidence that he could see me as an equal, not just as a woman he had assumed to be dependent and helpless. That night, as we sat together in the quiet of our home, I felt a shift in the air. The fear, the suspense, and the lingering tension began to lift. We were no longer bound by secrets or assumptions. Instead, a fragile but real trust had taken root, nurtured by effort, honesty, and the courage to confront the truth. I realized then that the $50,000 secret, the tests, the pretenses, they had all served a purpose. They revealed the depth of his heart, the limits of his understanding, and ultimately the potential for growth. And more importantly, They revealed my own strength, resilience, and the clarity to demand respect and authenticity in love. I reached for his hand, feeling the warmth of his presence. "I see you too," I whispered softly. "I see your effort, your willingness to change, your care, and I believe in us, despite everything that has happened." He squeezed my hand, his eyes glistening with a mix of relief, understanding, and emotion. "I see you," he echoed, "and I will never take your strength, your independence, or your heart for granted again." As I lay in bed that night, I reflected on everything we had endured, the judgment, the suspense, the hidden life, the fear, and the eventual revelation. Love, I realized, is never simple. It is tested, challenged, and sometimes nearly lost. But when both hearts are willing to grow, to see, and to respect each other fully, love can endure and flourish. The storm had passed. The suspense had ended. And for the first time in years, I felt truly seen, respected, and alive. The days following the ultimate test felt different. There was a quiet understanding between John and me, a sense that the fragile trust we were building could grow, stronger if nurtured carefully. But I knew that true emotional intimacy takes more than honesty. It requires patience, vulnerability, and shared experiences. I decided to open a deeper part of myself to him. Not secrets about money or independence, but emotions I had carefully guarded for decades. I told him about the loneliness I had felt, the moments of doubt, the fear of being judged and dismissed. I spoke of the dreams I had shelved, the nights I had stayed awake working silently, hiding my success to maintain peace at home. He listened, not with judgment, not with impatience, but with full attention. His eyes softened and I could feel his heart reaching out, trying to understand, trying to connect. "I had no idea," he whispered, voice tight with emotion. "I see now how much you've carried alone, how much strength it took to hide it." Tears pricked my eyes, not from sadness alone, but from the relief of being truly seen. This wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about vulnerability, trust, and the fragile courage it takes to let someone into your heart fully. Over the next days, we began to share more moments of emotional connection. Late-night conversations, quiet walks, simple gestures like holding hands while preparing dinner. These small acts became our foundation. Each time I saw glimpses of the man I had hoped John could become, thoughtful, attentive, patient, and genuinely invested in understanding me. Yet the suspense of the past lingered like a shadow. I couldn't fully let go of fear, not yet. Every time he hesitated or faltered, a flicker of doubt returned. But I reminded myself that change is gradual, that trust is rebuilt step by step, and that emotional intimacy isn't instant. It's cultivated over time. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, I turned to him. "Do you understand now why I kept my life secret?" I asked softly. He nodded, squeezing my hand gently. "Yes," he said. "It wasn't about money or independence or testing me. It was about showing me who you really are and making sure I could see and value that. I see it now and I will never take it for granted again." That moment, quiet yet profound, felt like a turning point. The suspense, the fear, the uncertainty, it was giving way to something deeper. Connection, understanding, and the beginnings of true love rooted in respect and recognition. I realized then that the journey we had endured, the secrecy, the judgment, the tests, had led us here. And while the path had been rocky and fraught with tension, it had taught us both the value of honesty, patience, and emotional openness. As I lay in bed that night, I whispered to myself, love is not about perfection. It's about willingness, growth, and the courage to see and be seen. And for the first time in years, I felt the fragile warmth of intimacy blossoming between us, promising a future built on truth, trust, and mutual respect. That night, the silence in the house felt heavier than ever. I sat in the living room, the dim lamp throwing long shadows across the floor. John had gone to bed early after another tense argument. One that started small but ended with words that cut deeper than he knew. "You've changed," he had said. "You act like you don't even need me anymore." I didn't reply, because deep down, he was right. I didn't need him anymore, but I wanted him. There's a big difference between needing someone and choosing them. For years, I had been silent, playing the role of the gentle, dependent wife. But after hearing those cruel words months ago, something inside me shifted. I started to see the truth, not just about him, but about myself. I walked into our bedroom and looked at him sleeping, peaceful, as if nothing had ever happened. I wondered how someone could rest so easily after breaking someone else's spirit. My laptop sat on the desk beside the bed. I opened it quietly. On the screen were the numbers that defined my secret life. $50,000 sitting safely in an account only I knew about. It wasn't the money that made me feel powerful. It was the proof that I had built something on my own. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I opened a blank email and began typing. "John, if you ever find this message, I want you to know. I didn't lie to you because I wanted to. I lied because you never gave me space to tell the truth." But then I stopped. Tears blurred the screen. Writing those words felt like admitting the end. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. John was awake. "What are you doing up?" he asked, his voice low, suspicious. I quickly closed the laptop. "Nothing," I whispered. "Couldn't sleep." He looked at me for a long moment. There was something in his eyes. Not love, not anger, but confusion. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. He turned and went back to bed. But I couldn't. My heart pounded as I sat there, realizing that soon something would have to change. Because secrets can only stay buried for so long, and mine was about to surface. The next morning, the air felt unusually still. Even the sunlight through the curtains seemed dull, hesitant. I sat at the edge of the bed, my mind replaying last night. John's suspicious eyes, the way his tone changed. Something inside me whispered, "He knows." But I tried to silence that thought. I went downstairs, made coffee, and turned on the kettle, pretending everything was normal. The house smelled of burnt toast and fading trust. When John finally came down, he didn't say good morning. He just sat, scrolling through his phone, acting as if I didn't exist. That silence, it screamed louder than any argument we ever had. I watched him over the rim of my coffee mug. For a moment I almost said it. "John, I'm not who you think I am." But the words stuck in my throat like broken glass. After he left for work, I went into his office. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe reassurance, maybe proof. But what I found instead made my hands shake. Inside his drawer was a folded letter. My name was written on it, in his handwriting. I hesitated, but curiosity won. I opened it slowly. "If you're reading this, it means I've already made my decision. I can't keep pretending anymore. You're not the woman I thought you were. You've become distant, secretive, cold. I don't know what you're hiding, but I can't love a stranger." My knees went weak. The room blurred. This wasn't just a letter. It was a goodbye. He'd written it days ago. The date at the top proved it. So he did feel the distance. He did sense something was off. I folded the paper back, my heart pounding. A strange mix of anger and sadness ran through me. He was planning to leave me, and he didn't even have the courage to tell me face to face. The irony hit me. I was testing his heart, but he had already given up on mine. That evening, when he came home, I couldn't look at him the same way. I felt like every smile he gave me was a lie. Every word rehearsed. He noticed. "You okay?" he asked. I forced a smile. "Just tired." He nodded and went upstairs. I watched him go, realizing how far apart we had drifted, even while living under the same roof. Later that night, I sat alone, staring at the laptop again. My $50,000 secret. My silent rebellion. For the first time, it didn't make me feel strong. It made me feel alone. Because what's the point of building a life, a fortune, a dream. If you have no one left to share it with, I shut the screen and whispered to myself, tomorrow, I'll tell him everything, but life, as always, had other plans. The next morning felt heavier than usual. I woke up before sunrise, my heart restless and my mind loud with all the things I wanted to say. Today, I promised myself I'd tell John the truth. No more secrets, no more pretending. He was still asleep when I looked at him. His face, calm and untroubled, almost made me doubt my decision. Maybe it would be easier to stay silent, to protect what little peace we had left. But peace built on lies never lasts. I went downstairs and prepared breakfast, trying to steady my nerves. Pancakes, his favorite. Maybe it was my way of softening the storm I was about to unleash. When he finally came down, he looked surprised to see the table set. "You're up early," he said, sitting down. "Yeah," I whispered, forcing a smile. "I wanted to talk to you." He looked up, suspicious but curious. "About what?" I took a deep breath. My hands trembled slightly. "About us. About me." Before I could continue, his phone rang. He sighed and answered, irritation flashing in his eyes. "Can this wait?" He mouthed to me before turning away to take the call. I waited, my words dying on my tongue as I listened to him speak softly on the phone, softer than he'd spoken to me in months. "Yeah, I'll meet you after lunch." "Same place," he said. Then quietly, "Don't worry, she won't find out." Something inside me snapped. My stomach twisted. She. He ended the call and turned back to me, but I couldn't look him in the eye. My hands were clenched so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Who was that?" I asked, my voice calm but sharp. "Work," he said too quickly. "Work?" I repeated. "You always say that." "Is that the same work you met last Friday?" He froze, just for a second, but it was enough. I saw the truth flicker across his face before he masked it with a smirk. "You're being paranoid," he said. "You've been acting weird lately. Maybe check your own secrets before accusing me." That last line hit like a bullet. He knew, somehow he knew. I stood there, my chest heavy, my eyes burning. "You think I don't notice the way you look at me now? The way you leave the room when I enter?" I said, my voice breaking. "You don't even ask how my day was anymore." He didn't reply, just silence. The kind that screamed louder than words. I wanted to yell, to tell him everything. The savings, the hidden work, the reason behind it all. But suddenly it didn't feel like it mattered anymore. "I was going to tell you the truth today," I whispered, tears welling up. "But now, I think you've already given me your answer." I turned away, walking upstairs, my legs shaking. Each step felt like leaving behind another piece of my heart. In the mirror, I caught my reflection, a woman I barely recognized. Strong, tired, broken, but still standing. And right there, I made a decision that would change everything. If he was done pretending, then so was I. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, John, smiling on the phone with her. I tried to tell myself maybe I misunderstood. Maybe it really was work. But deep down I knew the truth. The same way a heart knows when it's breaking. I tossed and turned until I couldn't take it anymore. Around 2 a.m. I slipped out of bed and went to his study again. My hands were trembling as I turned on the desk lamp. I wasn't proud of what I did next, but pain makes you do things you never imagined. I opened his laptop. No password change. That made it easier. Almost like he wanted me to find something. My breath caught in my throat as I saw a string of recent emails. One name kept appearing. Clara W. I clicked. "Thank you for last night. I really needed that. You always make me feel seen." My hands went cold. There were more. Photos, receipts from dinners, a booking confirmation for a weekend trip. My heart felt like it was shattering piece by piece. He was cheating. The man I'd loved, supported, and tested for his loyalty was already betraying mine. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. Then, without realizing it, I started laughing. Not out of joy, but disbelief. How ironic. I'd hidden money, a career, a secret life, to test if he loved me. And all along, he was the one failing the test. I printed one of the emails, just one, folded it neatly, slipped it into my pocket. When morning came, I was calm, too calm. He walked into the kitchen like nothing had happened. "Morning," he said, pouring coffee. I watched him closely. "Morning," I replied, my tone steady. "Did you sleep well?" "Yeah, you?" "Eventually." He didn't notice the edge in my voice. Or maybe he did, and just didn't care. After breakfast, he left as usual, but this time I followed him. My heart raced as I trailed his car through quiet streets and traffic lights. He stopped at a small cafe on Fifth Avenue. And then she appeared. Young, beautiful, the kind of beauty that comes easily. Soft laugh, bright eyes. She touched his hand across the table and he didn't pull away. I sat there in my car watching from across the street. My chest ached so badly I thought I might pass out. But instead of crying, I took out my phone, opened my hidden bank app, stared at the 50,000. That number used to mean freedom. Now it felt like revenge. When I got home, I printed another document. My resignation letter. My real job. The one John never knew about. And right below it, I wrote something in bold letters. For the first time, I'm choosing myself. That evening, when he returned, I was gone. Just the letter sat on the table, next to his coffee mug. When John came home that evening, the house was silent. Too silent. He called my name once, twice, no answer. He checked the kitchen, the living room, the bedroom, empty. Only the faint scent of my perfume lingered in the air. Then he saw it. A single folded letter lying on the dining table next to his untouched coffee mug. He picked it up slowly, like he already knew what it was and what it meant. His hands trembled as he unfolded the paper. "John, I'm not leaving because of what you did. I'm leaving because I finally remembered who I am. For years I hid my dreams, my strength, my worth, just to make you feel whole. But love shouldn't require losing yourself. I lied, yes. I hid things, but not to hurt you. To protect myself from a man who once said he'd never love a woman with nothing. You taught me to believe I was nothing, so I built something alone. There's $50,000 in my account. Money you'll never touch, because it's not about the money. It's about freedom. Don't look for me. I'm done being invisible." He stood there, frozen, the words echoing in his head. For the first time, he realized he didn't really know the woman he'd married, the woman he'd broken. He sank into the chair, clutching the letter. His eyes darted around the room, to the photos on the wall, the empty coffee cup, the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Everything felt wrong, too still, too hollow. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through his messages, searching for her. Maybe she'd texted, maybe she'd explain. Nothing. Instead, he opened his email, and that's when he saw it. An unread message from me, sent just an hour before I left. "You wanted a woman who had nothing. Congratulations, John. Now you have exactly that." His throat tightened. He whispered my name again, but the silence mocked him. He thought about calling Clara, but even her name made him sick now. Suddenly, every lie he told, every secret he kept, felt heavier than ever. He had lost something real and something money. Attention or affairs could never replace. He grabbed his keys and stormed out, driving through the night, searching aimlessly. The city lights blurred as his guilt clawed at him. At one red light, he saw a familiar figure walking down the street. Red dress, tired eyes. His heart leapt, but when he stopped and stepped out, it wasn't me, just another stranger. He laughed bitterly, tears running down his face. "She's really gone," he whispered to himself. When he finally returned home, it was nearly dawn. He placed the letter back on the table, poured himself a drink and stared at it until the sun rose. And in that golden light, surrounded by silence, regret, and memories, he finally realized what it meant to lose someone who once loved him enough to hide her truth. The bus rattled softly as it moved through the night. I sat by the window, staring at the city lights fading behind me. Every passing street felt like a chapter closing, every mile a piece of my old life breaking away. For the first time in years, I was alone, truly alone. No husband, no lies, no pretense, just me and the quiet hum of freedom. I had only one suitcase and my laptop bag. Inside that bag was everything that represented the life John never knew, the documents from my real job, the savings account details, and an unfinished story I'd been writing for months. A story about a woman who loved too much and lost herself in the process. Funny how fiction and reality can look so much alike. The bus stopped at a small diner just outside the city. I stepped out, needing air. The early morning wind was cool against my face, refreshing, but heavy with memories. I ordered coffee and sat by the window. The waitress smiled kindly, noticing my tired eyes. "Rough night?" she asked. I managed a weak smile, something like that. As I sipped the coffee, my phone buzzed. One unread message, from an unknown number. My heart skipped. I opened it. "I'm sorry. Please come home. We can fix this." No name, but I didn't need one. I could feel the desperation between the words. John. For a long time, I stared at the screen. My hands trembled slightly. The part of me that still loved him wanted to reply. But the part of me that had finally found peace didn't. I turned off the phone, slid it into my bag. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw an old man sitting a few seats away. He was watching me, his face kind but curious. "Running away?" he asked gently. I chuckled softly. Something like that. He nodded knowingly. Sometimes leaving isn't running away, it's choosing to live. His words hit deeper than I expected. I smiled faintly, thanked him, and returned to the bus. As the vehicle started again, I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on a blank page, waiting. So I began to write. They judged me for being poor. But I had a $50,000 secret. And sometimes, the real riches aren't in what you hide, but in what you finally learn to let go. My fingers moved faster with every line. The pain, the betrayal, the strength. All of it spilled onto the screen. It wasn't just a story anymore. It was my truth. Hours passed. When the bus finally stopped again, the driver announced, "Last station." I looked out, a small coastal town bathed in morning light. Quiet, peaceful, untouched by my past. I smiled. "Perfect," I whispered, with one final glance at the city behind me. I stepped off the bus and into a new life. Little did I know, my past wasn't done with me yet. Because sometimes, even when you leave everything behind, some ghosts still find their way back. 2 weeks passed. The coastal town had started to feel like home. The air was fresher, the nights quieter, and for the first time in years, I could breathe without fear. I rented a small apartment overlooking the ocean. Every morning, I'd sit by the window with a cup of tea, watching the waves crash against the rocks. It felt like they were washing away pieces of my old life, bit by bit. My days were simple now, writing, walking, healing. I'd even started publishing short stories online under a pen name. To my surprise, people loved them. Stories about love, betrayal, and second chances. They had no idea they were reading the truth. But peace never lasts forever. One morning, I received a letter, a real physical letter, no return address, just my name written in John's handwriting. My heart dropped. For a long time, I didn't open it. It sat on the table for hours while I stared at it, afraid of what it might say. Finally, I tore it open. "You're right. You didn't need me, but I needed you. I know saying sorry will never undo what I did. Clara meant nothing. I was just trying to fill the space you left when you started hiding from me. I see it now. I was losing you long before you ever left. I've read your stories online. You're brilliant, you know that? The world deserves to see you, not the woman I tried to make you, but the woman you really are. If you ever forgive me, even a little, write back. If not, I'll understand." Tears streamed down my face as I finished reading. Forgive him, could I? I wasn't sure. I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and stared out the window. The ocean roared louder that morning, as if demanding an answer I wasn't ready to give. Later that evening, I went for a walk along the beach. The wind tangled my hair, the sand cool beneath my feet. I thought about everything, the lies, the pain, the strength it took to walk away. A young couple passed me, laughing, holding hands. I smiled faintly. For a moment, I saw my younger self in them, the woman who once believed love could fix everything. But life had taught me something else. Love isn't about saving someone. It's about not losing yourself while trying to. As I stood by the water's edge, I took out the letter one last time. The wind almost snatched it away, but I held it tight. Then, slowly, I let it go. Watched it drift into the waves until it disappeared. The ocean carried it away, just like it carried away every tear, every memory, every regret. I whispered softly, "Goodbye, John." And for the first time in my life, the word goodbye didn't hurt. It felt like peace. As the sun set behind the horizon, I turned and walked back toward the town, toward a life I was finally ready to live. And maybe one day, I'd write the ending to that story. But for now, this was enough. Because sometimes walking away isn't the end of a story. It's the beginning of your own. They judged her for being poor. But what they never knew was that her true wealth wasn't in money. It was in courage, in silence, and in finally choosing herself. Because sometimes the richest thing you can ever own is your peace. If this story touched your heart, subscribe now. I share new emotional stories every day.